the Director of Analytics and Rate Setting at MaineCare. And from the rate setting team, we have Peter Kraut, the rate setting manager, and Grace Williams, Dwayne Parsons, and Lori Bailey. From our contractor, Myers and Stauffer, who has been working with us on this project, Jillian or Julia, can I have one of you walk through who's participating on your side?
Sure. Good afternoon, Julia Kachuka, and I'm the senior manager with Myers and Stauffer. And my coworker working with me on this project, and she'll be managing some of the muting and unmuting and hand raising process, is Jillian Kuthler.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder of why we're going about this rate setting evaluation, we have set a goal to develop a system for establishing and maintaining rates that are sufficient to sustain the financial viability of Maine providers, ensuring that MaineCare members have access to high quality services, and also to evaluate MaineCare's rates and rate setting system and develop a plan for the creation of a comprehensive, streamlined, and coherent system. Next slide. For today's meeting, we will not be gathering feedback about the level of reimbursement itself, the rates themselves. Those questions or comments will be handled during phase 2 of stakeholder engagement. Phase 1 is to gather input from you as providers and provider representatives regarding the impact that MaineCare's current reimbursement methodologies have on the providers, the services, and the MaineCare members. So again, it's more about the methodologies that are currently in place than the level of the rates themselves. But since the purpose of this meeting is really to obtain your comments, we are going to try to remain as silent as possible, so we won't be engaging in answering any questions that you might have unless they're pertinent to clarification of the discussion at hand. If you do have questions, you can send those to the email address that we've provided, and we can address those outside of this meeting. But we want to be respectful of the time dedicated to this meeting and address the discussion points and allow you to speak with your comments. Next slide, please. So since one of the potential goals of this rate setting evaluation will be to shift services toward value-based purchasing, we wanted to give a brief overview of what value-based purchasing is. So most of you are probably familiar with the fee-for-service model. That's what we typically pay, where you provide a service and we pay a rate for that service. Value-based purchasing looks at not just the cost of that service, but the quality of healthcare provided to the member at the same time. So if we want to increase value of the services that our members are receiving, we either have to increase quality or decrease the cost. And if we want to maintain a consistent value for our services in the face of rising costs, then we also need to be able to raise the level of quality being provided through those services. Next slide, please. So value-based purchasing works to move away from that fee-for-service model by finding ways to hold providers accountable for the value of care that they deliver. Value-based purchasing or value-based payments explicitly reward healthcare providers for performance relative to cost, quality, access, and/or service utilization objectives. In MaineCare, we have a number of value-based purchasing approaches in use currently, and future phases of the work will consider alternative value-based purchasing approaches as we evaluate new methodology options. Next slide. So when we're thinking about value-based purchasing, we're using the HCP LAN framework that describes value-based purchasing and alternative payment models. As I mentioned, many of our reimbursement methodologies right now rely on the fee-for-service model in Category 1. So there's no explicit link to the quality of the service or the value of the service. It's simply reimbursement based on the volume of services provided. In Category 2, there starts to formalize that link with quality and value to ensure that some of those quality metrics are being met. And in Categories 3 and 4, there starts to be more population-based accountability, where it's a lot more thought is being put into population health and the best way of managing the health of the population for the best quality outcomes that we can achieve. And where we're working towards adding new value-based purchasing methodologies, which may start at the lower categories of quality linkage, but we're also working towards improving the existing value-based purchasing models as we can get them more into that population-based accountability structure. Next slide, please. As we work through the discussion topics today, these are the 5 topics that we'll be addressing. We'll schedule a maximum of 30 minutes for each topic. And those topics are how well is the current methodology working for the services you provide? Does the payment methodology create the right incentives? Do you believe that the payment methodology for the services you provide is equitable to methodologies for services provided by other provider groups? Does the methodology result in administrative requirements for activities that are burdensome for you? And is the methodology consistent with value-based purchasing? Next slide. For some basic ground rules for this discussion today, Myers and Stauffer will be playing the role of moderator today. They will be introducing the discussion questions, ensuring that participants keep their comments to within the announced time limits, ensure that the comments are pertinent to the discussion at hand, and they will record and transcribe the meeting to ensure that all comments are captured. We ask that you, when you comment, you introduce yourself and name the services that you provide. Please only respond to the discussion topic at hand. You'll be able to respond to each discussion topic as they come up. But during any one particular topic, please restrict your comments to that particular topic. If others have made a point that you agree with, you don't need to repeat the whole comment. You are welcome to simply state that you agree with the other person's comment. There's no need to repeat everything that the other person said. Please respect the time limits for the comment period and limit the comments to those related to the impact of the payment methods and not to the rate amounts or the reimbursement amounts themselves. Next slide. So this session is being recorded, and we will post this on our website within 24 hours. It will be available online. The transcriptions will also be available. We're still working on the timeline for the transcriptions to become available, but those will be available as soon as we can get those created. So as a final note, like I said, we're not talking about the actual rates today, but we will be talking about those in phase 2. Phase 2 has been scheduled for mid-November. We're still working on scheduling the exact dates, but we'll get that calendar out to you as soon as possible. At that phase 2 meeting, we will be discussing the benchmark report that will be created partially based on the comments from you today. We'll be able to talk about the payment rates used by other states' Medicaid agencies, by commercial health plans, and by MaineCare, a full catalog of our existing payment methods, and we'll have some recommendations available as candidates for alternative payment models. And if you have any questions or comments that are beyond the scope of our phase 1 discussion today, or even if they're pertinent to the phase 1 discussion today, but you don't get a chance to say everything that you would like to say, feel free to email those at that ratesettingeval@maine.gov email address. Next slide, please. So with that, I think we're all set to dive into the discussions. I'll just say thank you again for joining us today. We're really looking forward to hearing all of your comments and getting your feedback on how our current rate system methodologies are serving you today. Thank you.
So also I wanted to say thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to go through each question, and we're going to use the raise your hand function so that everyone else can remain muted. Otherwise, we'll get some really uncomfortable reverb happening. If you don't know where the little hand signal is to raise your hand, it should be just above your box that's labeled chat. It has a little hand symbol. Next to it is a little megaphone symbol. So if it's not obvious, the symbol next to that's a little hand. So if you raise your hand, and then after you speak, if you could unclick the raise your hand so that you're out of the queue, and because we'll do it again for each question. If you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Okay, so the first question is really trying to understand how your current methodology is working for the services that you provide. Is it transparent, easily understandable? Do you feel like it creates opportunities for you to be efficient? And does the methodology reflect how you deliver services? So do you typically provide a bundle of services, but you bill separately for each one? Or do you provide a service that you would never do in less than 1 hour, but you bill in 15 minutes, or a daily service and you bill it in 15-minute or hourly chunks? So the way you bill it doesn't really reflect the way that you deliver service. So we'll go ahead and open it up to anyone who wants to raise your hand, and then Jillian will let you know as we go in order who's been unmuted so you can speak.
Oh, okay. First hand I see is Pete Plummer.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank you guys for this transparent process that you're going to walk all of us providers through. It's going to be much appreciated. And are you going to get to a point where you're going to be collecting data, on different operational needs, with the methodology? What I mean by that is, productivity standards or program related costs, to kind of cost out what a service is and how many of those things we can do in a day or a week. So that it's hard for, I don't know what the methodology that you're going to be proposing is, but we had a organization will come through earlier called Burns and Associates. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they did something similar, I think, in for certain services, and they asked for a bunch of data. And the transparency part is real important because I don't think I know they didn't use the data that we as providers sent them to come up with it with accurate and reliable rates, and it caused a whole mess of, discussion in the legislature and stuff. So I just don't want to relive that, and I think it's important to say that right up front instead of later on, and that's so I guess the methodology that we went through recently, at least from my perspective, I can only speak for myself and others that I've talked to, but today only for myself, that I just want the methodology to be open and transparent so that the data that you ask for is really the data that we use for the rates, at least, or we negotiate it, at some point, somehow. Anyways, it's more a comment than a question, I think.
Okay, great. Can I just also ask what services that you recommend that you represent, excuse me. And then I did want to clarify that Burns was doing a rate study of specific rates in order to develop a methodology and recommend a rate value. We're looking at the total rate process on how rates are determined and how MaineCare has a process for doing that. We're not actually doing a rate study of individual rates.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a very important part of that process, I guess. But yeah, the only thing that I sign up for many of these because my organization does many of the rates that you had. And in today's meeting, the only thing that I'm interested in all, but is the EPSDT, because we don't provide a lot of the services that were on the agenda for today's meeting. So I don't want to take up that time for all the people that provide those services, except for the EPSDT. I was just wondering, I'm very curious about that because it's something we're considering using for a service, because Section 106 is going to replace a lot of the day treatment stuff, and I'm worried about that. So I dialed in today for the EPSDT discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Jillian, next on the list.
Okay, next I see Darcy Shargo.
Hi there. Can you all hear me okay?
Perfect.
Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Darcy Shargo. I'm the CEO of the Maine Primary Care Association, and we represent the federally qualified health centers in the state. We didn't have enough lead time to prepare sort of what I would consider a formal network-wide statement or response to these questions, but I can share a couple of high-level observations in response to these, and then we do hope that we can commit to something in writing, or rather submit something in writing at a later date. So I'll start out by answering the question relative to the transparency and understandability of PPS. From our perspective, it's a fairly straightforward, outlined, as you probably know, in federal statute and dictated by a lot of federal guidelines. But we would argue that it is often a very misunderstood methodology, and there are a lot of assumptions built in there that we can certainly underscore in our written comments. And then I'll skip to the last part, which is around the methodology's reflection of how services are delivered. I think it's fair to say that for the most part, the methodology hasn't necessarily kept up with the cost of delivering care, and also hasn't necessarily kept up with how the care delivery model itself has evolved. If you look at how primary care has really evolved into the leveraging of care teams, into more population health management, and a growing reliance on electronic health records to help manage and support high quality care, I think it's hard to argue that the methodology has really kept pace with that. And again, we are happy to provide a little bit more detail, potentially in writing. And then I would add that health centers are, by statute, asked to really target their services to fit the unique needs and priorities within their communities. And so they often are providing a really full range of services, from medical care to other support type services, which can often be called enabling type services. And while the methodology reflects that there should be some level of integration and that this is a, quote unquote, a bundled rate, it doesn't necessarily support a high level of agility. And that is apparent as the environment around us shifts, both in terms of what I described above, with the evolution toward patient-centered medical home, with more leveraging of care teams that represent a number of different entities on that team, many of whom you actually really can't bill for. But also when we have really unexpected things like COVID hit, I think the methodology doesn't necessarily take into account how impactful it is to have an unexpected event like that, like an emergency of sorts. So that's where I will stop for that first question.
Great, thank you. Any other hands up? I'm not seeing any on my list. Jillian, are you?
No, I'm just going to quickly unmute the call-in users in case they are unable to raise their hands up. So if anyone that isn't a call-in user that would like to speak, you can go ahead and try now. And not hearing anything, I'll assume we're good to move on.
Okay, so our next question is talking about what the payment methodology, whether or not it provides the right incentives for quality of care, providing access to care, supporting primary and preventative care, the integration of care, care coordination, how members use services, and if it's structured in a way that it can avoid the abuse or fraud. And we'll go ahead, if you would like to speak on this answer on this question, please go ahead and raise your hand.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised for this section. I'm going to, again, unmute our call-in users. And not hearing anything. Let's see, it looks like Darcy. Darcy, is your hand up again, or is it still up? I didn't.
Yeah, sorry about that. It is up again.
Okay.
So this is Darcy again. As a reminder, with the Primary Care Association. Distinction I'll make here relative to the health centers is that it's really the mission and the programmatic design of the FQHC delivery model, as opposed to the payment, that lends itself to supporting the elements that you described below. So the health centers have a fundamental orientation to everything that's listed there, and they're required to work on all of those things, especially access, primary and preventive care, and all of the coordination and integration work is really vital to the community health center model. I would say that PPS, or the payment methodology, is a tool that helps to meet some of these expectation or elements, but I wouldn't consider it the sole driver for all of those expectations to be met. I would also add that health centers are unique in that they have patient majority boards who are also working to oversee the health center's compliance and make sure that they're meeting all of those elements noted below. I think that's a pretty unique characteristic of the health centers.
Great, thank you. And one thing on this I would say, well, we're sort of phrasing this in whether does it create the right incentives for that, for these bulleted items. Is there anything that you believe in the way the methodology is that is not creating these incentives, or it may be creating disincentives, if that is helpful for people to be able to respond on this question? if you feel like there's a way the payment methodology is structured that is providing a disincentive. Okay, maybe this is just not a popular question. So we can go ahead and move to question number 3. So this one, when we're talking about equitable payment methodologies, we're really looking at services delivered, across all providers. So how fee schedules are determined and updated, or frequency of update, the administrative burden, incentives for quality and access, are all or most providers within your service area treated equitably in terms of how their payment methodology is constructed. And again, you can raise your hand if you would like to respond on this question. If you're having trouble with that, please feel free to chat at us or write a question in the Q&A, because we can see that as well if you need help raising your hand, or so we can unmute you.
Okay, it looks like I've got Pete Plummer.
Yeah, just a quick question. You only want questions related to the MaineCare services identified on the agenda, correct? So if I had concerns about section 21, for example, I'm going to have to wait till that shows up on the agenda as far as administrative burden, as an example.
Right. So we're just grouped.
Okay.
So just for the services on this agenda, yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're not seeing any hands go up or anyone chatting to us. So we can move on to the next question. If someone thinks of something that they want to go back for these questions where there were no comments, we can do that as well. So this is really looking at value-based purchasing and administrative requirements. Is the methodology for your service consistent with value-based purchasing, or particularly with any other value-based purchasing approaches that you have in place through other payers? Are there any administrative requirements, such as coding, billing, or reimbursement, related to the methodology that MaineCare places on you that are burdensome, or perhaps completely different than what is required for other payers? You can go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to comment on this.
Okay, I've got Darcy.
So I just have a really brief comment, and that's around the alignment with VBP. I think there's actually a lot of alignment, given the way that the methodology really pushes integration and high levels of access, among a number of other things. It's also enabled the health centers to get very well versed and skilled in care management and supporting enabling services across a spectrum. So irrespective of a patient's, how they present. And those, I think, are all strong building blocks for VBP work overall. And certainly the health centers have a lot of experience in that realm.
Great, thank you so much. Are there any other who wish to speak on this topic? Okay, not seeing any. We can move forward to the next topic. Oh, that was it. That was the end of them. So, this was a really brief meeting. If there is anybody who would like to make a comment that has something that has not already been said, please raise your hand, and we can entertain those comments at this time.
And Darcy, did you have a comment?
No, sorry, I didn't lower my hand.
No problem. Okay. Since it seems like that we've got a little bit of time, I'm gonna go through and open the phones to a group of people, kind of people in batches, and see if anyone potentially wasn't able to raise their hand or had some technical difficulties and still wanted to make a comment. So I've got AK, both unmuted. Any comments there? If you have comments, feel free to stay silent and I'll move on. Okay. Anne Labont or Beth Pierce, any comments? Brian Wyatt or Cassie Hanscom or Charles Dingman, any comments? Okay. Then I'm going to, anyone who called in separately on the phone and potentially didn't log into the computer, I'm going to unmute you all now just in case you weren't able to comment.
Hi, this is Jeff Kirby from Maine Medical Partners. I apologize for getting on a little late and having this sent to me a little late from somebody that I work with, but can you explain, is this a compare to the current fee-for-service payment methodology?
I'm sorry, can you ask your question again? What we're really looking at is we're looking at the methodology that and the process by which MaineCare evaluates and updates all rates, sort of the entire process, not individual service rates. And so we were seeking feedback on how providers feel about different parts of the methodology, whether they think it's supportive of the way they're doing business or that there's some administrative burdens or some disincentives in the way that the methodology is structured.
Yeah, I think for us, so we provide primary care and specialty services. And I think the biggest thing, which is probably been noted even more recently with the relaxed rules around telehealth, is just, I think where it disincents it incents volume and bringing patients into the office, which I think ultimately reduces access and some of the quality that we're able to provide.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any other call-in users that would like to make a comment? Okay. Moving on to the next set of people, I've got Corinne, Dan Heat, Dawn, and Donna. Any comments there? Okay, hearing none. I've got Evelyn.
Hey, so you said if it's ASAP referral, it's another 2 hours. Okay, so this guy 10 minutes.
Some echoing there, which is why we're trying to do these in groups. Sorry about that. Evelyn, Kayla, Lori, any comments there? And then I'll just unmute all the M's. So Marge, Marilyn, Mary, or Megan. Okay. Then last, Ron, Stephanie, or Sharon. Okay, not hearing anything there either. I think I've made my way through the list, so if anyone wants to raise their hand or has anything, have anything to say, Ron, did I miss from you? Oops, sorry, Rhonda, did you make a comment?
Oh, hi. This is Rhonda. I work at Maine Family Planning. We do obviously family planning, but we also have a primary care clinic. I was confused about where it was talking how frequently the rates were reevaluated. I've been doing the billing probably 20 years, but we've been doing the regular rates for at least 10, and I've never seen any adjustments in office visits or preventative care visits. The rates have never changed in 10 years. Just saying.
Thank you, Rhonda. Yes, I think that's part of our review. We will be looking at how often rates are changed, how often it's reviewed for each of the service types, and we'll be looking at recommendations there.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for spending all or part of your lunch with us today. We do have the rate setting eval at maine.gov email address. If you would like to send us something in writing and you didn't want to speak up today, or something comes to you afterwards, don't hesitate to send us comments and information via the email address. We will be looking at all of that as well. Again, thank you for taking some time with us today. I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon.